Shut your mouth! In 2016, us pro wrestlers do this annoying thing. We introduce ourselves by saying, "My name is Adam Pearce," because we don't talk like real human beings. And if all you marks would just be quiet for 1 minute, you'd hear what I, the scrap daddy Adam Pearce, has to say.
You suck, Pearce!
You're listening to A Few Words with Eric Santamaria, who I once told should consider cutting his hair in the elevator at the Hammerstein Ballroom. And his guest this week is my manservant, Shane Hagadorn. So listen to him and keep your mouth shut.
Shane Hagadorn and myself go way back to 2004 when I was in CM Punk's second class at the Ring of Honor Wrestling Academy, and Shane would yell at me all the time, taking out his bitterness on me and the rest of the students. But I started working in the Ring of Honor office just a week and a half after training, so we spent a lot of time together over the years, not just in the office in Bucks County, Pennsylvania, but all over the country, really, and into Canada, too. So we're going to talk about some of our adventures in pro wrestling, and him becoming Adam Pearce's personal manservant led to a real funny story, if you'll divulge me a moment. That happened at the Glory by Honor event in the Manhattan Center in September of 2006 that year, if I'm correct. And as soon as I heard Adam Pearce introduce him as my own personal manservant, because everything's funnier with the word man in it, man cave, manscape, man, ha ha, I thought immediately of Lewis Black, because Lewis Black had a routine about what he would do if he had a lot of money. He would hire my own personal ball washer. So hearing that combination of words lead into manservant, I thought immediately of his ball washer routine, where he was going to pay a lady to follow him around and wash his balls as a display of his money, his power. What do you got? Another car? Ha 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 ha! I've got my own personal ball washer. And this led to a lot of joking around in the office. Eventually, he accompanied Adam Pearce into the faction, the Hangman 3. And what was funny about that is you see 4 bodies standing around because it was BJ Whitmer, Brent Albright, Adam Pearce, and his manservant. But because Shane Hagadorn started as a student, I guess you got that label forever and you're always going to be lesser than everyone else. It's almost like a slavery type thing where you only count as half a person. But he's in the group, the Hangman 3, there's 4 of them, so that shows you his standing right there, I suppose. So around the office, I started calling them the Ball Washers 4. And before they actually hooked up my computer to the internet, I'd have to send out all the video wires or commercials or whatever it might be. And one day I was sending a tag match where it was 2 of the Hangman 3 against another team. And I'd have to send out initially the footage on a mini DV tape, but later on the file I'd actually email over on a server to the person who would upload it. So I called this file so-and-so versus the Ball Washers.mov or whatever it was, just as a goof. And this was supposed to be a free giveaway match on the website. The problem is, when the guy uploaded it, you can see the title across the stream at the top. And he didn't change it. So it said so-and-so versus the Ball Washers. And then we go on the ROH message board, the hub for all bitching and complaining from the Ring of Honor fan base that we looked at all the time. And someone said, Ball Washers, someone must be a Lewis Black fan. So someone got the joke they weren't supposed to hear. So anyway, more joking is about to ensue, as we're going to reflect on Shane growing up a wrestling fan, what motivated him to move halfway across the country to train under CM Punk, how his career at Ring of Honor went, and what he's doing now. So lace up your boots, wrap your wrist tape around, and pull those straps down. It's time for A Few Words with Shane Hagadorn.
And joining me here is the very first graduate of the Academy, Shane Hagadorn.
Eric, this is a great opportunity for the graduates from the ROH Wrestling Academy. But more importantly, it's a great opportunity for myself.
All right, should I call you Shane Hagadorn, Chris Maurer? What should I call you?
I have no idea. The funny thing is, I actually had this conversation with a friend of mine who said, I told I was doing this, and she said, are you going to go by Chris? You going to go by Shane? I was like, honestly, I have no idea. She said, they're kind of like the same root person.
I asked that because your Twitter, it says the artist formerly known as Shane Hagadorn, or wrestler, manager, whatever. But now that you're back to some degree, I thought, well, this sort of changes things. And of course, I try to be respectful to the wrestlers or the personalities, whatever they are. I'll call you whatever you want. I'm not going to call Muhammad Ali Cassius Clay if you want to.
there was definitely once upon a time, I'm sure, as you remember, in the early days where I was very much kayfabe everything. I was a dick to fans no matter what. Even if I knew them personally in front of people, I was like full on always heel.
And me.
And yeah, to everybody. And now it's, 13 years later, and I'm just like, I've been Chris Maurer publicly for the last 3 years,
How's that feel compared to not being that?
It's really interesting how much I've kind of found myself exploring the root of Shane Hagadorn.
I'm guessing it's Shane Douglas.
What created? That's actually the fake version of the story.
What's the real version then?
When I was in junior high, there was this girl named Selena that I had a crush on. She had an older brother, half brother, who in my memory was a very intimidating Puerto Rican, and a few years older than us, so I'm talking like 8th grade, 7th, 8th grade, so 12 years old or whatever. And if I remember, her brother was like 4 or 5 years older than us, and his name was Shane Hagadorn.
Get out. There really was a Shane Hagadorn?
Yeah, there's more than the two of us stuck in my head. I actually used to have this glossary of very contrived comic book characters I created. Like, I created my whole universe. And I even used the name Shane Hagadorn as one of the characters I created his real name. Years before I was even remotely thought that I could actually go through with becoming a wrestler, I would do creator wrestlers on all the video games as Shane Hagadorn. Mm-hmm. I did e-wrestling online for a couple different places.
By the way, apparently, and someone sent me this on an inbox, they said that you're, and this being me, in a fantasy wrestling league, and my age was listed as 42 or something.
Really?
Yeah. Where's someone made this up? I don't know. It bugged me.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Shane Hagadorn was a character I used in e-wrestling leagues that I created a character for, and wrote matches and commentary and everything. And so when it came time to decide who I was going to be, I was backstage at the Midnight Express reunion show, and I'm talking a couple hours before showtime, and I'm still very undecided on what name I wanted to use. Shane Hagadorn or Nathan Summers.
Scott's younger brother?
Son, actually. That's Cable's real name.
Okay.
Nathan Christopher Charles Summers, which is part of the reason my son is Nathan Christopher.
Wow.
Cheech of Cheech and Cloudy asked me like what name you were wrestling under, and I told him I can't decide which one. He said you should use Nathan Summers, so I picked Shane Hagadorn. Funny enough, there is also a wrestler who is Nathan Summers. I don't know if this person still wrestles, but I remember seeing their name come across my screen on the computer every so often. Fast forward 10 years, I get a Facebook or maybe even MySpace message from a guy that I went to junior high with. Why did you steal Selena's brother's name for your wrestling name?
Well, let's backtrack a little bit to your origin.
Okay.
You grew up in East Lansing, Michigan?
Born in Lansing, Michigan, grew up in Potterville, Michigan, in a house my dad still lives in. Went to school in Holt, Michigan as well. That's where I graduated from. Lived in East Lansing the last 8 years, I guess, that I was in Michigan, through college at Michigan State. And then I moved out here. I left November 1st of 2003 to start training. And I never had any intention of ever going back.
And you didn't?
No.
How did you get into wrestling, especially to the point where you thought, I want to give this a shot. I want to try to be a pro wrestler. I'm going to move across the country to do it.
I don't know, because it's always been there.
Mm-hmm. Were your parents into it?
My dad was. My mom, it's kind of cute, always calls it big time wrestling because I'm from Michigan. And that was the name of the original Sheik's promotion that he ran. So no matter whether it was Raw, Nitro, Superstars, she called all of it big time wrestling. Branding works. We all call tissues Kleenex, you know?
Now it would be hashtag big time wrestling.
Big time wrestling. So I don't remember a time where I wasn't a wrestling fan. Like, I remember renting the big hard plastic cases of all the Coliseum videos. I remember going to my friend Jack's house and watching WrestleMania 6. Like 8 months after it happened, with how long it took VHSs to come out, and having our wrestling buddies with us watching it. I remember the first pay-per-view we were able to get, because where my dad lived, we didn't have cable. It took us forever to get satellite. So the first pay-per-view I watched, possibly Good Friends, Better Enemies.
Oh, wow. So that's years.
Like live,
right,
as
yeah.
it happened. I think that was the first one I actually was able to watch live, because we lived in the sticks. I grew up on 3.5 acres of land on a dirt road. I've lived in Pennsylvania for 13 years, and I still haven't seen a dirt road here.
But that was like 6 years after the first pay-per-view you watched with your friend.
Yeah, that's why it was always renting. As soon as they came out, we were at the video store renting everything. Like, for me, Michigan, was all WWF territory. I didn't know anything else existed. But I watched WCW without knowing that's what I was watching, because we had Pass Sports. And Pass Sports would air the Mothership
Saturday night.
But I didn't know that was a different company. At that age, I just thought it was
wrestling.
Another WWF.
Right.
So I was watching Flying Brian Pillman 6 years before coming into WWF.
Yeah.
And I was watching Ric Flair and Sting and the Road Warriors. And I even owned that WCW Nintendo game that had like the Road Warriors on the cover and everything.
Am I mistaken? But when you went to the top rope in that game, you could actually lose by staying up there too long.
Yes.
You'd get
You
disqualified.
got counted. Something that's never actually happened in professional wrestling ever.
Well, I mean, the referees do count,
It just...
but it's never
1,
happened.
2,
Yeah.
3. Oh, look at that plant. 1, 2, 3. Oh, that fan. 1, 2.
That could actually be a good storyline. That rule's never been utilized, where let's say it's two friends fighting, and maybe Macho Man's going to do the double axe handle, but he has this conflict in his head. I don't want to do that to them, and then he gets disqualified.
Yeah.
But aside from that, the game was pretty fun.
Yeah. Yep. But so I never knew it was a different company. It was just a different WWF to me.
Right. Why doesn't Hulk Hogan team with Sting?
Yeah, exactly. I don't ever remember even having that lull as a fan. You know how some people drift in and out, or
Right.
Mine just got more and more. And then that friend, Alan, the one who called me out on my name, because at this point I was in a different school, but I had maintained friendships, he'd calling me one day and saying, "Yo, Diesel and Razor are on WCW." And my response is, "What the hell is WCW Nitro?" Like, I had never seen Nitro prior to the NWO invasion. So then I started watching Nitro religiously, and it became that same thing we all experience. Like, which do I watch? Oh, I'm just going to try and stay up till 1 o'clock in the morning and watch the replay after I'm done with Raw.
That's when the replay was so helpful. And especially as the time changes happened, where the first hour of Nitro wouldn't go head to head, but the second hour would. Okay, you flip to Raw,
Yep.
and then you catch the last hour of the Nitro replay.
Yep.
You're taping both, flipping back and forth. If
Yep.
something really important's happening. It was a very fun
It was
time.
it was
Before
it was
DVR.
phenomenal. Yeah, before DVR. I mean, DVR would have made that a very different experience.
or picture-in-picture for that matter.
Yeah. So my mother convinced me to finish school before I went and tried this.
And what were you majoring in college?
English. And so I agreed. And it's probably for the best in that I was nowhere physically prepared at that point. I was a freshman in college. I was still a smoker. I was partying. Like, I was nowhere physically in shape to go, I'm going to move to Texas and join a wrestling school.
Did you play any sports growing up or anything like that?
A little bit of everything. The only thing I did through high school was I played soccer for 4 years, but I played soccer. The rest of the year, I didn't do anything. Like, rode my bike, but I didn't do anything that was physically active. And even my freshman science teacher was our amateur coach. This was after I transferred schools, and he pushed me, like, you need to do something during your soccer off season. Come join the wrestling team. Similar to what Rodney said, one of my regrets too, that I did not take advantage of the amateur wrestling. I didn't grow to appreciate it until my cousin Vincent, who's a little bit younger than me, he picked up amateur wrestling, and then I started going to his meets. Then I really grew an appreciation for it. All of our uncles, this is the Mexican side of the family, most of them wrestled in high school. and they would wrestle us. We were kids growing up in the living room. And there's actually a strange family connection that my one uncle growing up was really good friends with, I'm going to forget his name now, Kevin Jackson. He had a couple of UFC fights, fought Frank Shamrock, I remember, but
Not
he
Kevin
was...
Randleman.
No, Kevin. I want to say Kevin Jackson. He was 1992 Olympic gold medalist. He was a family friend growing up. So I'm like, I look back on it now in hindsight, and I'm like, I had a lot of tools at my disposal when I was a kid that I didn't even realize I had.
Right.
To me, he was just my Uncle David's friend Kevin who wrestled. He was at Foxcatcher. He was one of the first people who I found out was kicked out of Foxcatcher when dude started going crazy and apparently didn't want anything black in the house. Like, didn't want cars, like nothing. Kevin was one of the first people to go because he was a black man.
Wow.
Like, I didn't know that. I was reading up on it because I was trying to remember the guy's name.
Cars, T-shirts, men, everything black has to go?
had to go. And that was
Jeez.
part of that guy, of DuPont's, I guess, beginning of him losing it. Growing up, I had all of these tools that were connected to wrestling, but I never took advantage because I didn't get it. I never thought it was something I could do because I wasn't an athletic kid. I guess belief in myself that I could do it.
I have a similar thing where during high school, I wasn't in any sports or clubs or anything like that. I was making up wrestling videos with my friends in the basement and writing all that, editing all that, performing all that. And as I got into grappling at Tiger Schulman's, especially when I'm grappling with the younger kids who wrestle, I keep thinking, man, if I could have just done that, put the two and two together, how it would be great for me and have that mindset back then. Of course, the only difference is I couldn't triangle and guillotine them either, but it would have definitely helped.
Yeah, it's in that as soon as we started grappling, especially, a couple years in, we were training with Brian Danielson. That's when I started to see how grappling really would have benefited me in the ring. And rolling around with Rocky Romero too, because he was one of the guys who started teaching us like shoot takedowns, leg trips and things like that were legitimate takedowns to use.
And how would that benefit you in your professional wrestling aspect?
Legitimacy. It's that thing
Movement?
that you get, movement, positioning, footwork, and I think it's that it adds that element of legitimacy that you get from somebody such as a Kurt Angle or a Brock Lesnar who that they know what they're doing.
So in other words, Vader would enjoy watching your matches.
Maybe. Yeah. Yeah. But all that stuff, it was like you don't know that until you look back on it. You look back on how you got to where you are now, and you're like, okay, there are the things that might not have changed anything, but it would have been a cool experience.
Sure.
Those experiences you wish you would have taken advantage of. There's a trail of those, or things that you wish you could have gotten more out of. When I look back on it during my self-imposed divorce from wrestling for the last 3 years, that the opportunities that I could have gotten more out of this. Or I wish I'd have gotten more out of this. That was one of them, and you end up actually finding it's a life story, not just a wrestling story. It becomes more of a perspective on your bigger picture, not just the small window.
But you still found the motivation to go to a pro wrestling school.
When I graduated, I was doing an internship at our local broadcast station. So I was learning literally everything. It was video work, linear editing, audio boards, producing, directing, TD work.
How did you not get my job at Ring of Honor?
I know. Lighting. I had to, one of my things to pass my final exam to become a paid intern was I had to 4-point light a set for a 2-person talk show. It was easy because it's a government access show, so I'm just doing town hall meetings. But it's still, okay, how can I do things to make this a little more visually interesting?
Right.
Because you're just watching 4 people being talking heads.
So you're going to turn into a mini Orson Welles.
So you're just like, hey, how about you tilt your camera at a little bit of a lower angle, and we'll just mess around with the perspectives we're looking at these people at, because they're just talking about where to put this cell tower. It forced you to become a little creative with really boring visual material. Regardless of, even if it's a fascinating topic to you, it's not the most interesting thing to look at.
Right.
5 people, 4 people just talking for 2 hours.
And you sound like you were a creative person already with making...
I did a lot of writing growing up. I still have this little short story that I had to, when I was in fifth grade, I believe it was, that I wrote.
Well, you were making your own comic characters.
Yeah, I had creating my own little comic book world that I used to actually, I guess you could now call it live action role play. now that it has a name in this day and age, where it was just like we'd create the world, me and my cousin would act them out. I had 3 acres of land. I had tons of area to play out the storylines with the characters and, fight them out. And yeah, there's a lot of creativity. And it continued on as I grew into writing for websites. And I don't know if it was a secret to fans of Ring of Honor, but 99% of what you read on the website from 2008 until 2013 was written by me.
Mm-hmm. Do you think that wrestling attracts creative types, and why?
Yes, I do. It also attracts a lot of
maniacs.
And wrestling is a weird mix of look at me.
All entertainment is. Validate me. Right.
But it's also an idea of I want to entertain you. It's this weird dynamic of you need to pay attention to me, but I also want to give back to you.
But that's any artist, though.
Yeah.
Any person who gets on a stage to do stand-up, play music, act, all of it at the end of the day, subconsciously, maybe consciously, is saying, look at me. Mm-hmm. For some reason, I think I have something to give to the world. I have something to entertain you. Love me, daddy.
Mm-hmm. Wrestling's just a very physical way to do that. Very physical form of doing that, which lends to a bit of masochistic behavior. It is. Wrestling's masochistic. You're throwing yourself at something that has a little bit more give than concrete.
Right.
The cable, you talked about the ropes when you talked about the seminar you did with Rodney.
Yeah. Actually, that was a tryout. JPW and Jay Lethal won it.
That's right. That's right. That's right. When I heard you talking about it, I was like, is this the one? Yeah.
Yes, it is.
I remember when we did my first training, one of the kids that trained with us was pale as a ghost. And so when we got done with our first day of ever hitting the ropes, we got back to the apartment we all lived in, and he took off his shirt, and he had massive, disgusting black and blue welts all over his back. Yeah, I wasn't going to give him a name, but yes. Back to the creative thing, because wrestling, it gives you an opportunity. To be creative in developing a character, if you're lucky. Sometimes you're just told this is what you're going to do. Then it's like, all right, well, be creative within the constraints of what you're told you need to do. Creativity in putting together your match, creativity in your promos. There's so many venues to be creative. You may have an outline, or you may be somebody who's lucky enough that the promoter trusts enough to just say, go, dude, you know what you're doing.
The way it used to be, mainly.
Yeah, the way that we're told it used to be by a lot of the older generation.
Well, and that's
obvious. A lot of what I experienced. There's only one time I can think of where I was ever told this is exactly what I want you to say and given a script. And it was that very first Ring of Honor pay-per-view, I believe. And I get that because at that point, it was the first time Gabe was doing something like this. I understand that he wanted everything to be very much like, this is the story I want to tell. This is very much how we want to go. So I remember me and Pierce did a promo. I'm pretty sure it was the first Respect is Earned. Yeah, we did a promo, and he had a very detailed script. One and only time that was ever given to me for a promo. For the most part, it was just, go.
3, 2.
This is the point. All right, we're hyping this match. Go. And that's why you do multiple takes. Sometimes you end up with 60 takes for certain people.
Well, if 57 works the best, that's all you need.
Exactly. But then you hit that one that it's just that was perfect. But it was done without a script. You had the creative freedom to figure out what works best for your character, what works best for the story you're trying to tell, for the match you're trying to hype. When you get that one that you feel the difference between that one and the other 59 that didn't work.
Mm-hmm. So how did you end up, because you were looking at a school in California, a school in Texas, how'd you end up in Bristol, Pennsylvania at the Ring of Honor school?
It was probably 6 months into Ring of Honor's existence. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of iterations of this website, Ransylvania, 411. I think it's all this weird family tree of how it got to these websites. So I don't remember at which point it was this website, but I remember I was always reading these reviews, VHS tapes of the Ring of Honor shows. They just sounded pretty awesome. So I tracked down bootlegs of them, tape traded to get them, and fell in love. Even with that inane 90-minute, I'm exaggerating, but opening sequence to Air of Honor Begins, because on video it was the whole bus trip and everything with the Christopher Street.
Yeah. Once you get past all the nonsense.
Past that first like half hour of that Air of Honor Begin show, I was hooked. It was a different style of wrestling than that point that I had really seen, because I hadn't exposed myself to a whole lot of Japanese wrestling at that point.
And you only got ECW later on when it was on
First
TNN,
ECW
right?
I ever saw was Living Dangerously 98. So it was the last, quote unquote, as they build it, Tajiri Super Crazy match, when Tajiri was still in just the trunks, the blue trunks, and the first of the two Jerry Lynn RVD matches.
2000.
Yeah. Sabu and Taz, if I remember right, unification match. So it was the first time I was seeing a lot of this. It was the moment I developed my man crush on Steve, on Carino. That was the promo with balls that ended up with him getting blasted with the chair. And the spot that I actually, when he puts the chair down and grabs the chin lock on balls while he's sitting on the chair, I actually ripped that spot off blatantly for a match in IWA Mid-South. Same, it was something I'd never seen before. I stayed with it from that point on, got every single pay-per-view. I recorded every single episode of ECW on TNN. I was even that person sitting there waiting for that pay-per-view that never happened, but our program guide was still advertising.
Just crossing your fingers.
Hoping that it wasn't true.
Well, as soon as Paul Heyman showed up on Raw, you had to know it was over.
Exactly. That was my first real consistent exposure to anything different than WWF, WCW. I would go to like my local indie shows, NWA Great Lakes, and there was one in particular that was just called PWF, like generic Pro Wrestling Federation, and it ran at the LA Globe in Lansing, Michigan. On that show was Jumping Jimmy Jacobs.
Jumping
Jimmy Jacobs. Cat in the Hat, Dr. Zeus hat, came out on a pogo stick. Jimmy had to have been like 15 years old at this point. I can't remember. He told me down the line after I told him about these shows.
And he's still writing for NXT now, isn't he?
As far as I know, yeah. There was a match between Jumpin' Jimmy Jacobs, Gorgeous Gavin Starr, CM Punk, and Colt Cabana. Turned out that in that tag match, like, Punk knocked Gavin Starr out trying to do a springboard moonsault. They were the four who stood out to me the most, besides this other dude who I think became a male stripper.
Miles Long?
No. Fast forward to August of 2003. The show was the very first show they did in Dayton, Ohio. Wrath of the Racket. My friend is like, Jim Cornette's on the show? I have to go. I called the office so annoyingly, just to make sure tickets were still available. Now I know who was answering the phone every time. I was disappointed because Punk wasn't on the show. He was, I want to say, in 01, day of the show. But it was the tag match of like Moff and Daniels against AJ and
Luke Gallows.
No, it's an awesome experience to see live. In my head, it was like, this is what it must have been like to go see ECW at the arena. Because I'd gone to ECW house shows and they were cool, but they didn't have that feeling. But the Ring of Honor show had that feeling to me. It was energy, and the fans were into every single spot, like everything. And on all of the tables, the chairs were flyers for wrestling school opening soon. And back in my head, I just said to myself, when this opens, I'm going. Drove out to Pennsylvania by myself, stayed at a hotel, went to the tryout the next day, and that was where I met the future Evan Starsmore for the first time. Was standing outside as waiting as well. He had driven down from Boston and it was ridiculously early. What was nice about the setup at the Langhorne office is that it was inside a warehouse. So the ceilings were high. There was tons of open space indoors. So we were able to run laps inside. Because at this point we were supposed to start at the beginning of November. We ended up starting the Monday before Thanksgiving 2003. The tryout was in October. So we're running laps. I think it was like a half hour running lap around this area. It probably was legit, like almost a quarter mile a lap. 300 squats.
300. I had to do like 700. That's not fair.
Because, yeah, you came on a bad day. I still remember that.
I think it was about 1,000, actually.
300 squats, and then it was sit-ups and push-ups, conditioning drills. It was, they're not going to let us in a ring. None of us know what we're doing. And even if we had, it's more just... Our tryout was more designed to prove that you were willing to gut it out. It was a proving ground. It was a test. I think it was 2 weeks later I got the email saying you were accepted into the school. So we started November 3rd. I left Michigan November 1st, stayed in a hotel for 2 days. My dad came with me. We found an apartment in Germantown. We started our training the Monday before Thanksgiving of 2003. I went on the road that immediate first weekend, which was Raven and Punk's second cage match. It was so weird being on the other side for the first time. At that point, the ring crew was being kind of directed by kids from Logan DeVito's school, the future Luke Harper, Bobby Fish, Colin Delaney, Cheech and Cloudy were at the time. And it was also kind of being a little bit guided too by Wayne and Mary, who did a lot of the sound, the lighting and stuff as the time went on.
Production stuff.
Yeah, production stuff. Little did I know that would be the next 10 years of my life. Setting up and tearing down rings. Surreal experience being at that first show on the other side of the curtain. Meeting people that I had been watching, like Raven and Punk.
Right.
Carino for the first time, and I still remember being up in the bleachers looking down at the cage match while it was happening, talking for like a half an hour, 40 minutes with the SATs, with Jose and Joel, who didn't know me at all, but they had no problem. They knew I was Punk's kid, as we all were called at the beginning, and that was enough for them to be like, okay, then if Punk's willing to accept you as one of his kids, you're cool with us.
Now, by the time we're recording this, just the other day, Punk announced that he's going to have his debut fight in UFC. I think it's September 10th.
Yeah, 202, I think.
203, but it's in Ohio. And this has been a long time in coming. I remember when I first went to the ROH school, anytime that he was there, he'd have on Pride tapes. Jimmy would bring a lot of VHS tapes, UFCs, things like that. But now that people are going to see him fight in the cage the first time, we know him from WWE, obviously, where he became a big star. What was it like training under Punk?
I remember him saying, I'm not a drill sergeant, but I'm not going to be easy. His intent was to make it be more like that dojo feel that he experienced when he went over to like 01 and whatnot, like a little bit more. You had to earn your right to set foot in that ring. It wasn't just, hi, welcome to wrestling school, here's your ring, hop in. It made me angry. Not that I wasn't allowed to get in the ring, but it was like that I was that anger and determination and that drive that I'm sitting here doing squats, like staring at that ring. How bad I wanted to get in that ring. Whatever it takes, I want to get in that ring. Like, I need to be in that ring. 6 weeks, I want to say, before we ever set foot in the ring. And the only reason we set foot in the ring that first time was because Samoa Joe came in to work with us. We didn't pro wrestle with Joe and Punk. We shoot wrestled with Joe and Punk that first day.
You rolled, basically.
We rolled around with Joe and Punk.
What's it like rolling with Samoa Joe?
Oh
Especially impromptu.
Joe's big. And solid. And so rolling around with somebody who's 100 pounds, 75 pounds more than you,
right?
Like, you feel that. Like, I can still remember that feeling of rolling around with Joe. And we did it in like short intervals. It was like 1 minute. And I just remember how happy I felt that I made it out of 1 minute with Joe without being tapped or without being submitted or chill, like anything. It was, I made it with 1 minute with Joe without losing. I survived.
Yeah, and that's enough of a victory in and of itself.
That was enough of it for me. After like the new year and getting into January, February of 2004, then we started getting into the ring more. And I remember we all had a seminar. The second day was hosted by Jersey Championship Wrestling. Steamboat,
Ricky Steamboat,
Les Thatcher were the two main hosts of it. But it also featured random people who were on the shows just coming in. Chris Candido taught me how to throw a punch. Because Punk admittedly would say his punches sucked.
Well, I hope they don't now.
Especially now. Prior to this, I was punching people in the forehead. And he's like, you're going to break your damn hand. Which blows my mind, because if you watch Randy Orton, that's how he throws a punch, like two people's foreheads.
Well, isn't that what Mick Foley said, how Terry Funk's punch looks so legit? Because it is.
Yeah. So Candido taught me how to throw a proper punch. Balls Mahoney was at the show, at one of the seminars. Danny Doring was at one of the 2 days. Just, it was people who were there to be on the show would just chime in, pitch in, and it was just such a rewarding experience and made you feel like you're part of a bigger family, like the wrestling family.
Did you feel like a family day to day during the week in Langhorne?
Well, it helped the fact that 4 of us lived together. Myself, Evan Starsmore, Jesse Robinson, and Anthony Franco. We were together 24 hours a day for the most part.
Well, what was your relationship like with Punk? Because I came in a year after you. I was in the second class, and I did not have a good dynamic or relationship with him at all.
Mine was very good. Once we kind of found, as a group, found our groove with Punk, it was very good. He was very open to us. He needed a ride to the airport. Hey guys, can you give me a ride? Dinner's on me. Can you pick me up at the airport? I'll take care of your gas and more. Like things that I would have done for absolutely nothing because he was my trainer, but it was more, I felt more of a connection than just as the guy who was my trainer. Relevant to current TV, because the Preacher TV show just started on AMC. At one point I was at his house and he just gave me the first Preacher trade just because. Me and Davey Andrews riding out to Norm Connors with him. It was like that road trip time with him. It felt more than just that student teacher.
So you graduate from the school. You have your first match at the Armory on Route 1 over here in Philadelphia. It was the pre-show to the Midnight Express reunion event. Mm-hmm. And at that point, I had been working in the office for 8 months. How did that start?
I needed a job. They needed a cameraman at a World 1 show at the arena. This is your first time in the ECW arena. It was an awesome experience. In the World 1 show, like Punk wrestled Homicide on the show, and Homicide got knocked out on something in the show. And Punk grabbed like a headlock, and D was snoring. Carino wrestled on the show. I think Carino's kids wrestled on the show.
Well, were they 5 at the time?
By his kids, I mean Ricky Landau and Alex Law.
Now his actual kids wrestle.
That blows my mind. And Colby's awesome, too. Josh Daniels was on the show. Masato Tanaka was on the show, which was so cool to see live. Masato Tanaka wrestling.
Didn't you end up shooting JPW also?
Yes. Mike Awesome.
Vader.
Dan Moff. Samoa Joe. If I remember it, that was the main event of the tag match.
Hope the ring was reinforced.
Jay Lethal and Azrael in a ladder match. I did merch at a 3PW show. I filmed multiple ECWA shows.
Didn't you shoot one of the Joe Punk matches?
I shot World Title Classic and Joe Punk too, both. The last show I filmed was Punk and Jimmy Rave's cage match, Nowhere to Run. That was the last show I filmed, and then I was just like, I love doing this, but I need to take a step back, even though it was at a financial loss to myself, to focus on wrestling. Because at that point I was setting up the ring, wrestling a pre-show match, or sometimes even a match on the main card, filming, and then tearing the stuff down. And that was at a time when our ring crew was still relatively easy, as opposed to the 5 to 6 hour event it became by the end of my tenure.
Right.
I remember the first show we did at the Armory, Final Battle 2003, with Muda and Kojima and whatnot. The show was over and I was at the diner eating by 1 a.m.
Oh my God.
Yeah, I know.
That would not be how it was for...
Versus fast forward to 2010, and I'm lucky if I'm leaving a building at 3 a.m. for a show that ends at 11.
Right.
That was just an example of how big Ring of Honor got in my tenure there, and how much work was dumped on a very small group of people.
Well, you concentrated on wrestling for the next few years.
Mm-hmm. At the beginning, we were just black boots, black trunks of our own. That was Punk's idea. We had to earn our colors. Very similar to what, how Japan treats theirs. You watch like the prelim matches with the young boys and they're wrestling in boots and trunks.
Eventually, you won the top of the class trophy.
That was 2006. Mm-hmm. Same show as Davey Richards' first show. Sarah Del Rey's first show.
So how did your career go for the first little bit here?
When we first started, there really wasn't much of a pre-show. There'd be pre-show matches here and there when Gabe just wanted to look at somebody and didn't want to put them on a show yet. Like there's pre-show matches that have like Roddy on them.
Dean Ambrose.
Yeah, much later, pre-show matches, and that was more Pierce, I think, when Moxley came in. The first year until the second class graduated, it was me and Davey and occasionally some of the other guys wrestling in main show matches that we had no business being in. Like, we were way too green to be wrestling on main show matches. The opportunities to do it were great, but we were basically enhanced. We were the enhancement guys. We were there to make everyone else look good, which is an experience and you learn from it, but it's not the same as figuring out how to put a match together that's going to enhance both people.
Right. Be useful. At
that time, the Ring of Honor schedule was still pretty light, so it was a little easier. Like, we found this place in Zern's Farmers Market, Worldwide Wrestling Alliance, where I wrestled a few months worth of shows there.
Some of those matches are on the Wrestling Roundtable YouTube.
Yes, they are. I hate them. It's interesting, though, to watch that.
So that means I want everyone to click on it and see if you hate it as much.
But it's interesting to go back and watch those, and you can see, like, at that point, you're just trying to ape the people you really liked. I remember, I think the match that you have on there, me and Anthony Franco, I just snap him and keep kicking him in the back. Why? Because that's what I saw Loki and Joe do, and I liked that. So I'm just going to copy that.
And they copied it from Kawada or
Exactly.
whomever. Yeah.
And it's just a food chain of copying it, but not necessarily understanding it. I don't know that there's this whole history of, Kawada and Misawa that dates back to the beginning of their careers. So all of these matches we're watching where they're hitting their finishers 5 seconds into the match, there's a reason for that. But I don't know that because I don't know their history. I just think it's cool.
Whereas you're just like, I'm going to do a tombstone.
I'm going to do a tombstone to do a tombstone. Punk hooked us up with Ian Rotten, so we went out and wrestled some shows for IWA Mid-South. 17-hour travel just to get there, and then 4 days of shows, and then I remember I had to sell my DVD collection to be able to afford going out there for the very first time and making $40 in 4 days. Sleeping in our car, I think 3 of those days. One of the days, Chris Sabin and Alex Shelley were kind enough to offer us their hotel room, but we were so paranoid that it was just a fucking rib that we slept in our car. It was the nicest thing in the world, and now, knowing those guys later on, that it was very genuine, and they probably don't remember this at all. We were so paranoid it was a rib, we still slept in our car. You don't know what you're getting yourself into. You know what you read in Mick Foley's book, or what you saw in the original version of Tough Enough. That's the knowledge you have of what you're getting yourself into, unless you know somebody who can tell you, but I didn't know anybody. It made the ability to just go wrestle in Indiana for nothing very difficult. So we started looking locally. We started wrestling for Chikara, for Quackenbush. It was the first time that I felt comfortable to be the Shane Hagadorn I wanted to be. As Eddie Kingston started calling me on commentary, was the jerk.
Steve Martin?
No. I think that was the Chikara safe version of instead of calling me the asshole. Mm-hmm. Cocky, jerk, mean, vindictive, spiteful, which suited my mentality, as you can probably attest to when you first met me.
I hated you when we first met.
I hated all of you. I hated everybody who set foot in that school.
But what did we ever do?
Existed because I had to prove myself to get in this ring. Fucking prove yourself. Prove that you made it through the tryout. Which to me, that was a proving, like, step one of proving yourselves to me. It's like, all right, now get in that ring and prove yourselves to me. Prove yourselves to me that you're going to sit here while we make you play Duck, Duck, Goose. That was one of our ribs, make you play Duck, Duck, Goose.
Did I do that?
I don't remember. I don't remember, but it was in your class, like that second class of people.
Okay.
Because it helped with your explosiveness. Like, this is very obviously a rib who everyone went along with. Okay. Go outside in the snow and run laps around the duck pond. Okay, I'm in a bad mood today. You're going to go do 500 squats now. Why? Because. Not that we had done anything in our career to justify that, but especially with me and Davey, it was just like this walking chip on our shoulders.
This sounds like an abusive cycle to me.
Yeah.
Like, I was abused by my father, so I'm going to abuse my kids.
My father hit me 10 times. I'm going to hit you 20.
Right. I remember walking in and seeing a bamboo shoot.
Oh, yes. Cane. Yes.
And the Singapore cane being there at all made us tense.
Yep. And 500 squats. You had to do the running up the stairs.
I remember leapfrog in the hallway.
The leapfrog in the hallway, which was something we did too, but the hallway in the Ring of Honor office in Bristol was much more cumbersome.
Oh, yeah. You could hit your head on that air conditioning vent in the end of the hallway.
That's why it was much more like the training for you guys was much more making do with the space we have. We couldn't, even once we got in the ring, we couldn't do anything off that top rope because the ceiling would decapitate us.
Wasn't there a Gotch Bible that we did?
The Gotch Bible with a deck of cards that Punk treat, got us. That was either, push-ups and squats, sit-ups and squats. Yeah, the Gotch Bible. Yep. It was not easy, but I think anyone who went through that can say that they were in great shape by the time they got into the ring. Your body was physically more in a better place to handle the ring than it was 3 months earlier before you were allowed to get in the ring. And your training took a year, 10 months, instead of you learned how to take a couple bumps. Yeah, you're ready for your first match. You trained for 3 months. Yeah, go have a match. And that wasn't the idea. The idea was you're going out there, especially for our class, I think he made it a lot clearer, was you're going out there as a representative of Punk. If you go out there and look like shit, it makes him look like shit. Mm-hmm. So he wanted to make sure that we were as ready as you could possibly be. That at the very least you didn't look sloppy. What you were doing looks like you knew what you were doing. You weren't going out there looking like you stepped out of a backyard. One of my closest friends now says to me that the first time he came to Ring of Honor show and saw me, he wanted to punch me in the face because of the smile I had. Okay, little things. The little things can make a huge difference, whether it be having stupid hair just to get heat. And I had lots of stupid hair.
Oh, you used to shave designs into your head and
Rich would help me that sometimes. Rich Trapp would.
make horseshoes and other
Yep.
sort of things.
Yep. For me, it became about the little things, whether or not they got noticed. And that continued for me throughout. As a manager, it was just the little things that even if only 10 people notice it, if they react, then hopefully the people behind them will react too.
Eventually, you were the
Manservant.
for Adam Pierce. How did that come about?
Well, I had the top of the class trophy forever, and I got a chance to wrestle while I had it literally every single person who graduated from that school. Some of them were genuine matches. Some of them were like 3 minutes. You have 3 minutes to go. I had a 3-minute match with Mitch Franklin in New York City that he still gives me shit for because I didn't give him any shine. Like, we have a 3-minute match. Cut off immediately, your shine's the comeback. Put me in a slightly higher profile, so then I got to wrestle
BJ Whitmer.
BJ Whitmer, yeah. It was kind of like the slow start of me having a bigger spot in the entire company. Because I took over the ring crew being the head of it. I started driving the trucks. I started writing with Alex Payne together, like putting together the programs for the shows. And then once Gabe left and Pierce took over, then I started writing the website content and having a little bit of contributions to other things, like ping pong ideas off me. And then I was allowed even more creative freedom for the entire product, not just myself, under Delirious, under Hunter. That part I could never thank him enough for, because he allowed me a lot of creative leeway to create the stories on the website that affected the entire company. I became the manservant through Pierce's feud with Delirious. Gabe wanted me to kind of be an old school heel, which wasn't what I wanted, but it was the role I was asked to play. A natural pairing with someone like Pierce, who was very much of that NWA style heel classic bad guy. So we played with it at the beginning a little bit in FIP for a few shows and DP Associates, but it was in Ring of Honor where it actually became a thing, and a continuous thing from whatever show that was in New York that I joined Pierce until his last, which I think was when he wrestled Albright in the arena and kissed me on the mouth full open.
Tongue.
Probably. Who knows?
Groping.
Yeah. That's also the night that my in-ring career for Ring of Honor basically ended, too.
Well, how did that happen?
Trained with Brian, which is when I felt like I was in the best shape of my life. Brian left, and it left a void. Like, I didn't have that same motivation without Brian there anymore.
To push you?
Yeah. He was my neighbor while he was living here, so I saw him a lot. It's one of those when I said before, when you look back on it, how much more you could have gotten out of something if I wasn't so hesitant, scared. I was scared to push myself.
Why? Did you just not believe in yourself
Yeah,
enough?
probably. Even with support of people like Punk, who once blogged that me and Davey were the future of pro wrestling, whether, hyping his own students, but regardless, it shows a level of faith.
Right, because he wouldn't say that about this person or that person, but he
Yeah.
mentioned you.
Brian being really hands-on, like everything we did, he did with us. Until he got hurt, like everything we did, he did with us.
And he was very caring, attentive.
Very attentive, and very much wanted everybody to be better. And
Helpful.
Ricky Reyes would come in and out and help because he was living in the area at that point, and I had no grasp of anything I was doing. We're only now starting to really understand the things that Punk and Brian and Aries and Delirious and Joe were trying to teach us.
Did you just feel out of your league?
With Brian? Oh, completely. I felt dumb, even asking questions on how to do things.
Why? Questions are showing curiosity.
I know, but it was that lack of faith and lack of confidence. And even somebody that I consider a friend, you know how Brian is. You never see him for 10 years and could run into him when he came to the one show. I hadn't seen him in 3 years, and he came at the Ring of Honor show, and it was like I saw him yesterday. That was all me. And I don't know the experiences of so much. I mean, me and Alex have talked about it, and as I've reconnected with Pelly in the last year, we've talked about it, and we all had very similar experiences in that, with that, knowing how much more we could have gotten out of the people we were with, but we weren't mentally ready for it or didn't believe in ourselves enough to do it, and I stopped training as much. I felt like I was getting a little more out of shape, and I hurt. I think it started with my knee. It was the first thing that went. I had to have my knee scoped. And there's a couple of DVDs where I'm on crutches. And then my back went, and I had to have elbow surgery. And I want to say at that point I just started really getting into the swing of Pierce, because when he had his little match against Morishima gives me the Saito, and I have the sling on. Well, he's giving it to me because I had the elbow surgery a couple months prior. And it was just like this 2 years of just injuries. And the culmination of it was at that, I want to say it was Glory by Honor 7. I feel like it was like a 6-man or something. The Vulture Squad and Roddy against like me, Hero, and I can't even remember who else. And before the match, we're calling it, and it was like, Ruckus gives this awesome Japanese arm drag, just kind of, get up for him. And I timed it wrong. And I jumped too early and too much. And as I'm coming down, it's like that moment where everything's moving really fast, but in slow motion at the same time. So I'm coming down, and I see I'm going to hit the ropes. So I try to correct and end up landing right on my left shoulder. And I heard it crack when I landed.
Was it separated?
I had a small crack, is what the x-rays ended up showing, a small crack in my shoulder. But it's pro wrestling, and we're all stupid. Gotta finish the match, kid. It was in my head. And I still had like 3 minutes of stuff to do with Jigsaw, with Ruckus, and with Roddy. I was in too much pain to even communicate how much pain I was in. So I was just going through the spots that, I was going through. Roddy chopping the shit out of me, Jig giving me a gory bomb, and my shoulder's fractured, and I've got, my shoulders behind me in that gory bomb position, and I can't even communicate how much pain I'm in. And I didn't finish the match, and as soon as the match got done, I went straight outside of the arena, and I just started crying, because once the adrenaline wore off, how much pain I was in. Like, I couldn't move my arm. And it was either Alex or Pelly, I can't remember at the moment, who came down to me. And this hurt worse than the Albright powerbomb of death. It hurt worse than when I during the CZW feud at a CZW show, Hero gave me the jumping pile driver, and my grip slipped, and I spiked myself while he was doing it. It hurt worse than that.
Worst pain of your life?
Probably, yeah. I had nothing left after that. It timed in with everything that happened with Sweeney.
Well, what happened with Sweeney?
Leaving Ring of Honor with his illnesses, and I ended up stepping into his role with Sweet and Sour Inc.
Larry Sweeney was manager in a faction, and you were kind of like...
I was part of the faction as a result of merging of the Hangman 3, which was me, Adam Pearce, Brent Albright, BJ Whitmer, with Sweet and Sour Inc. That was Hero, Bobby Dempsey, The Wolves, Tank Toland, Sweeney, through his own personal challenges and demons and illnesses, left Ring of Honor, and
just by osmosis you were in that place.
I was already in that position of having been Pierce's manager. I just stepped into, we no longer called it Sweet and Sour, but just stepped into this unnamed faction.
And you ended up managing Sarah Del Rey, the American Wolves, who are in TNA now,
the Kings of Wrestling, which is Chris Hero and Claudio Castagnoli, Antonio Cesaro.
Well, eventually you came back in Pro Wrestling Respect when we were running those shows. I don't know if you wrestled much beyond that.
Before the Respect shows, we got into the HD Net stuff. Towards the end of the HD Net run, that's when the Kings and the Briscoes were having their rivalry. That culminated in the Final Battle 2010 6-man tag, the Briscoes and their dad against me and the Kings. That was the biggest thing I ever did in Ring of Honor.
Getting clotheslined by Jay and Mark Briscoe's dad.
Papa Briscoe, right in the face. It was wonderful. As a manager is when I ended up having the biggest role I ever had, because that was one of 3 main events on the pay-per-view. Mm-hmm. The title match, that match, and the unsanctioned Fight Without Honor with Kevin Owens and Sami Zayn, El Generico. Weird sometimes to call people.
We all do. I think we all have
strange.
that. Like when we watch NXT or TNA, and I'm just still calling him Claudio.
Yeah, but it's wanting to convey it in the name that more people would know.
Right. I'm just saying that you and I, and people like that were in Ring of Honor or whatever, we still have a little bit of a hard time.
Yeah.
I have an easy time with Kevin Owens. I don't know. Some just flow off the tongue, but others are just harder to get used to.
Yeah. So but that match, I wasn't a wrestler in that match. And that was hard for me. It was a difficult thing for me to do, to pretend like I didn't know what I was doing. We even shot a promo in Louisville for the miserable failure of an HD net tapings that were in Louisville, me espousing my credentials. All of that part got cut from the promo that eventually aired, and it was just a hype for the match.
Why? Because you were supposed to be a goof?
The angle became that I don't know what I'm doing. I'm just a goof. Like, once you learn what you're doing, it's really tough to pretend you don't know what you're doing. Cornette threw it at me is, people don't realize that J.J. Dillon was an amazing worker. He had to pretend like he didn't know, like, that he was just a manager guy. In the ring, you know, if you put him in there in a match, he was an awesome worker. All right, well, if J.J. Dillon can do it, I can do what J.J. Dillon did. I can dumb it down. I can pretend like I have no fucking clue what I'm doing. It was hard for me to do.
You seem to pull it off, though.
I'm a good little worker. Gabe told me that once. Actually meant a lot at the time. Kevin told me that too, after I had a match with Roddy in Chicago.
This is Roderick Strong.
Roderick Strong, yeah. In the traditional sense of wrestling, it's always usually the vet, and Roddy is the oldest veteran next to TJ Perkins in wrestling.
Don't you mean the youngest vet?
Veteran, yes, next to TJ Perkins. Him and TJ Perkins are the youngest veterans in wrestling. Roddy let me, because it was like a gauntlet match, so we had to wrestle like 4 matches against me, Hero, Tank Toland. It was all like Roddy against Sweet and Sour. So Roddy let me put together the match because it was a 5-minute match, and he had to actually call like a full-length match with Hero at night. So I put together the match, and Roddy was fine with everything I called. And after my little 5-minute segment with Roddy, I came back, and Gabe says to somebody, that Hagadorn's a good little worker. And Kevin comes up to me, no offense, but I didn't know you knew how to work. And that's a good thing. He knew I knew how to do stuff. Not that I did stuff in the matches I had, but that I knew what I was doing as far as, like, technically, I know how to apply a headlock so it looks legit. I know how to do wrist locks. I know how to do moves properly. But he didn't know I knew how to put together a match that had a story. It was a 5-minute match with Roddy, but I put together a match that had a story, a purpose. It may have been something as simple as, I don't want this motherfucker to chop me because they hurt. And it was a match that I consciously cribbed a little bit from when Punk wrestled Roddy at Future Is Now. Just like we consciously cribbed from Punk's fake Christopher Daniels entrance when I had my fake Bryan Danielson entrance. It's very consciously cribbed from the guy who got me here. You know, there's a reason why Punk signed his legit WWE contract on the Ring of Honor belt I was holding, because I was his student. Even if people don't get it, it makes sense. That was one of the first times that I ever got feedback where it was like very positive. And the fact that it came from Kevin, who hands down, one of the best people that I ever had the privilege of working with and calling a friend when I was during that time. And that whole group, as I'll say, Carino, Cabana, Kevin, Generico, like having that praise come from somebody like Kevin after the match meant a lot to me.
And that match with the Briscoes and their dad, was that basically your write-off?
No. My final write-off to Ring of Honor was at Homecoming 2012 when Hero came back for one show at that point before he went to NXT and elbowed me. Shortly thereafter, I'm trying to remember the name of the workout program. It's in the Beachbody family, not P90X. I had already done that. It was one of the other ones, like T25 or something. In the process of doing one of the DVDs, there was a lot of jumping involved in this one, and I made it through the DVD just fine. The next day I woke up and I could barely walk. My back was like in excruciating pain. The most pain I had probably felt since I'd fractured my shoulder. I remember laying in bed in our apartment next to my wife and crying and saying to her, it's done. Like, I'm done. I don't think I can do this anymore. And like you can see now, like even just thinking about it, it's hard. Really, really hard thing to accept. It took me a long time to accept it, and I didn't realize how long until that Pro Wrestling Explosion show, because for whatever reason Alex has a better memory for my career than I do. And he's like, do you realize it's been 5 years since you were in front of a camera? I was like, what? In my head it'd been like 2 or 3. Like, 3, because I was like, my kid's 2 years old, and I know it'd been before Nathan was born. He's like, no, it's been 5 years since you were in front of a camera. Holy shit.
Sinclair Broadcasting bought Ring of Honor. It was 2011, I believe.
Yeah, it was announced at Supercard of Honor in Chicago, and they officially took over, what? Do you remember? May? June?
I want to say June.
Yeah.
And
when they came to the office and talked to us.
Yeah. And I think we all knew at some point we were all going to be checked off the list.
Yeah.
Sid was first. I went later.
You and Sid were almost a year apart to the day.
Yeah.
Sid got to wait till after Christmas at least.
Yeah.
He got to celebrate Christmas with a job.
You left, I guess, maybe, several months after me? Year?
October of 2013.
Okay, so you made it almost a year. And you mentioned Pro Wrestling Explosion, which just happened recently, June 5th, I believe, this year.
I believe so, yeah. It was a Sunday afternoon show. It was the day that we were supposed to get bombarded with like the worst rainstorm of life, and it ended up being not that bad. So it was a very small draw, but the people who were there were so into it, and the guys gave them their money's worth. All 12, 15, 20 people, whatever it was. And it gave me back that feeling of, this is what I missed. Not even so much being in front of the people, but that camaraderie in the locker room of guys that you haven't seen in years. Like, Sanjay Dutt was on the show. I haven't seen Sanjay probably since 2010. And it was like, hey, I just saw you last week. What's going on? How are the kids? Like, that sort of conversation. And reconnecting with Ernie, who I hadn't seen in 2 years, and I hadn't seen Bobby Dempsey in like 3 or 4 years. Like, I've seen Grizz more than those guys.
Grizzly Redwood.
Yes. But I still hadn't seen him, I don't think, since his wedding. I hadn't been to a wrestling show in almost 3 years at all. I divorced myself completely. The day after I was let go from Ring of Honor, I put a gun to Shane Hagadorn's head, basically. I killed my Twitter. I killed my Facebook. The first person I heard from was Colt Cabana, just to check on me. Didn't ask me any questions about what happened. Nothing. He just wanted to know how I was doing.
At least he talks to you.
Yeah, but even still, I hadn't heard from him. And I haven't heard from him since. But he had no reason to reach out to me. And he didn't fish, you know? Sometimes people will do that and then they'll fish for information. No, he wanted to know how I was doing. Just another, I guess, little example of that bond that we all get from touching each other in our underwear inside a ring.
In baby oil.
In baby oil sometimes. I never baby oiled.
Not in public.
Not in public. So I started going to these On Point wrestling shows with Alex. I wanted to go to a wrestling show. I love wrestling. You know, and I'd basically cut myself off from everything not WWE or NXT and New Japan, the Access TV stuff. And as soon as I walk in the door, so when you start in Hagadorn, you want to work this show? You got your gear with you? I'm just here to watch the show. In the back of my head, I'm like, I wish. I want to. The same self-doubt that held me back makes me feel like I never pushed myself in the ring when I was in front of people, because like I was safe in how much I put out there, you know? I was never ballsy enough to go, I've never done a springboard moonsault before, let's go try that, you know? And the same thing like Alex, had to get over those fears too, and now it's like, he's like, I'm gonna go try a split leg moonsault, and just goes and does it. I'm gonna try a Jericho salt, just goes and does it. But it took us a decade to get over those fears, and, you know, and I was still, those same fears creeping in my head, like, I can't do it, but then I guess, you know how Alex is, very persistent. Annoyingly persistent, but not wrong. You know, he's like, you can do it. Like, I did a promo for the Pro Wrestling Explosion show that was very true, of him being the guy who really got me off the couch, pushed me, like, you can do this. We can do this. We can finally have that match that we always wanted to have, that we never got to, that with each other, of the kind of matches we would have in training, or we would have a 25-minute match in the school. You need to get motivated, get yourself consistently back in the gym, because I've dipped in and out. But after the baby was born, it became a very convenient excuse to not go to the gym. I can't do it. I got a kid. I work a night shift. My wife works a day shift. I'm home with the baby all day. I don't have any time for this. No, I found a gym that had a daycare. Forced myself to go, even if I got home from work at 4 a.m.
Where there's a will, there's a way.
Yep.
And you look in probably the best shape I've ever seen you.
I feel good. My hips that a year ago were killing me I couldn't have sat this long. That were killing me a year ago just to sit. They don't bother me that much anymore. My knees still creak. That's what happens when you're running around back and forth on wood and metal. And Eric can see how far apart my fingers are right now. It's that thin. And then it was like, this might be the only chance we get to do this, because this might just be a one and done show. Do you want to be my manager on this show? For Alex, it was like, I have family coming. I have a girlfriend coming to this show. I would love it if my best friend was my second for this show. I did it, and it felt amazing to be back in front of a crowd, and it felt amazing, like I said, to be in the locker room and to catch up. And really, part of that catching up was letting a lot of shit go.
Like what?
grudges that had built up over the years, giving people second chances. That was 5-6 years old, if not older. We went through too much together, all of us. Like, that's kind of how I looked at it. We went through, all of us, regardless of how we chose to go through it. We went through so much together with all of our time on the road, the training in the ring time, the time in the hotel rooms, the times at the dinner table, or having beers together, or just sitting in the office shooting the shit, listening to god-awful Alex Jones and Howard Stern stuff.
Ladies and gentlemen,
Let me tell you about the latest conspiracy, but only after you buy my gold and my t-shirt and my merchandise.
Well, let me tell you on that note, because some of the moments that I remember the most about working in the office are laughing, and especially when my mom died, how great everyone was to me then. And you came to my dad's wake too. I appreciate your friendship over the years. And it's funny how this is called A Few Words, because you and I can talk forever.
Yeah.
We had to hit record on the button so we can actually get some of this, because we were just talking before we started. And as we're winding down here, are you going to be doing any more shows in the future?
There's other places that I've put out feelers to of like, okay, here's an idea. I don't know whether or not it'll be picked up on. My end goal would be in 6 months to a year to at least have that one last match that I can be happy with. But I just want to have fun. There was way too much time in the last 10 years that wasn't fun and I didn't enjoy. Politics, people, whatever the reasons.
Drama.
A plethora of reasons of things that did not make Ring of Honor fun. And jobs can be fun. It was my job in every sense of the word. It was our job Monday through Friday, plus the weekends, 70, 80-hour work weeks. And there were fun times, but a lot of it towards the end, like post-2009, there was not. As much as I enjoyed working with the Wolves and the Kings and how much I learned and got out of that, I guess we can say when the camera light wasn't on, it was not a lot of fun.
Right.
If I'm not enjoying myself, what's the point? And I found inspiration in it through Alex, through Grizzly's knee surgery and him coming back, through stuff that Ernie has gone through in his life, through watching Karina, watching Kevin and seeing his and Sammy's successes and Cesaro's successes, but more personally than that, seeing somebody like Steve Carino, who I don't know if I ever told Steve to his face how much he means to me. Tried to express it to him in text and stuff, like watching Steve have a major neck surgery that should have ended his career come back, like all of those things. A wife who's supportive, a desire to maybe have my kid actually see me have a match. All of those things play a part in this, in me doing it again. But if I'm not enjoying it, there's no point.
Well, I hope you enjoy it going forward. And is there a place we could find you on Twitter? Maybe keep up and see if you're going to be on the next Explosion show after next.
My Twitter is just at CJMauer39. I feel like we barely scratched the surface of our experiences.
Well, I also want to talk to you about superhero movies.
Of course.
There was a time when movies weren't just about superheroes, but I know they're very popular and I want to talk to you about some of them. So please come back.
Definitely. Thank you very much. It's been wonderful to catch up. It's been too long.
It's been too long. Great to see you.
Let's use the word cathartic experience.
Let's. The day I was told I was being let go from Ring of Honor, I had just finished watching the Michael Elgin, Davey Richards ROH title match from Florida that Dave Meltzer had granted his 5 stars on, I believe. So I wanted to see the match everyone was raving about because I had time to kill. I was just waiting to see what the next best of compilation was that I was going to put together when Ross called me out of the office and told me that Sinclair is getting rid of me. When I went back into the office, Chris was the only one in there. He looked up at me and I said to him, "It's about to get a lot quieter around here." I guess except for Chris's cough. Because over the years, I think you probably could have heard me cackling down the street, let alone in the same warehouse complex, at some of the times and some of the laughs that we had. Some of my best laughs in my life were in that office. And as far as his pro wrestling career goes, I hope Shane Hagadorn gets the closure that he so desires. In the meantime, Shane/Chris will definitely be back, and we're going to talk about comic books, superhero movies, and the like. Next week, though, I will have a few words with another Chris. You know him from our Wrestling Roundtable days. Chris Harris will be on the podcast. Until then, please support the show. Give us a good review on iTunes, subscribe there and on SoundCloud, follow on Twitter at A Few Words with ES, like on Facebook, send an email to afwpod@gmail.com, and I thank you for your continued listening and enjoying. You are listening to Better Part of Me by Fireside Chat. Listen to all the songs from Fireside Chat at soundcloud.com/fireside-chat. See you next week. Same pod time, same pod channel. Later.
For so long I felt so wrong. Every feeling is dead and gone. All these feelings are better part of me. And I can feel it like I need to get away. And I can see it that the truth is here to stay. And I can feel it like I'm never on my way. 'Cause you should know I'm looking for an answer. On and this feeling's gone. I could be wrong, but it's been so long. Can this be the better part of me? Is the sky just painted black? Will the stars ever enter back? Can this be the answer that I need? How many times have I made up my own mind? How many times can I say that I have tried? How many times have I made up my own mind? How many times? How many times? We know just how the story goes. You know, we're looking for an answer. On and this feeling's gone. I could be wrong, but it's been so long. Can this be the better part of me? Is the sky just painted black? Will the stars ever answer back? Can this be the answer that I need? We've known just how the story goes. You've known that we'll never know just how the story goes. That we'll never know just how the story goes. We'll never know. And this feeling's gone. I could be wrong, but it's been so long. Can this be the better part of me? Is the sky just painted black? Will the stars ever answer back? Can this be the answer that I need?
Do it again! No, that was good. That was the best one.
Yeah?